We're doing something a little bit different for tonight's show. As always, we're streaming on YouTube and Facebook. Our goal here is to facilitate a conversation in the Tango community about race, which isn't something that happens a lot. We're basically just gonna give everyone who's expressed a desire already to contribute a chance to speak, give their thoughts, and then we'll try to generate some discussion for each person. And it was our first time doing this, so we're just going to kind of see how it goes. Maybe it'll take on its own format as we go along. I personally have a couple pretty loud voices in my head telling us not to attempt something like this. One is that I'm a white guy without any credibility or receipts. What do I have to contribute? Another is Oxygen's a tango school. It's not our place to be getting involved in this, and we're kind of exposing ourselves, risking whatever. The reason that we're doing it, though, just addressing those 2 points, is it just seems, especially in this particular situation, white people's reluctance to speak is actually a big part of the problem, and we are not just a tango school; we're a tango community, and so we should be able to. We are a community. In fact, for me, we're my main community, and so we should be able to talk about these things. So my goal is for that to occur today, and I'm sure it'll be bumpy and rocky at times, but I'm just going to do my best to make sure that everyone who's agreed to speak feels heard. The way that we assembled this group of people, so we reached out. We made an open call to the general population. I don't know how many people got it in time, but then we reached out to everyone who has kind of been active on social media the last few days. Some of them didn't want to talk, some of them did. We certainly appreciate anyone who's willing to stick their neck out and actually say what they're thinking and feeling during this time. So, Megan, did you want to say something before we begin?
No, I second all of that. Yeah, I feel like something has turned, and I feel like it's something that we can't not talk about. And I'm hearing from Black leaders that we should be talking to our own communities about it. And my community is the Tango community. So let's do this. I'm curious if anybody wants to start off. We're looking to check in with you about how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're mad about. Sure, Jay.
Well, first I wanted to shift. I saw the headline and it was like open, debate about what's going on. And I wanted to quickly shift from a debate. This is not a debate. So this is more of a dialogue and a place to understand and a place to hear. And so that's what I want to share. First off, it's not a debate. I think it's difficult to talk about, and so we have to keep it open and safe. Like what we're sharing here, we're putting ourselves out on a limb and being really vulnerable. Like it hurts. So, and it's touchy, and I think everyone feels something like that inside their body, right? So you feel it viscerally in your body and it's not comfortable. So first thing I want to say is just to knock off that this is a safe place. This is a place to share and put stuff out there, and it's not easy to talk about. So I understand, David, I'm somewhat choking up. It's hard. So first place is we're here to dialogue and process something, hopefully together. And so just keep it about bringing people together, not apart.
speak up. I'll break some ice. I just want to, um, as personal as this is for me, as a woman of color, as a Black woman with mixed heritage, as even as like a light-skinned Black woman, even I am hesitant to speak on my own experiences, to offer help to others, just because for fear of me not doing it right, of fear of, if I speak up, then people are going to assume that I speak for all Black people. And I don't even, I haven't myself sussed out exactly what I want to say or how I feel, about what's happening. And so I think, like Jay was saying, it's an incredibly vulnerable thing to do. And, it's a lot. I do work for like a women's movement studio, and it kind of, their whole goal and mission is to, celebrate the value of everybody's body, and I like to think that in the dance community, it's no different. The reasons we dance, the joy we feel when we dance, and the joy we feel when we connect, comes from first and foremost our bodies. And if we are allowing space for certain bodies to be more worthy than others, then we are also allowing space in our own bodies, for that same type of negative self, that I'm not worthy, that, I am not deserving, and so this type of dialogue, this type of connection on an emotional and empathetic level, it's one of the many things that's important right now, is, and there are a lot of societal things that tell people to disconnect from our emotions, and that in and of itself is part of the problem. We get, and this isn't even to speak about how emotionality is policed between genders, between races, all of that. But, disconnecting, a lot of the most hurtful things I've seen have been from people closest to me who are disconnected with their own emotions and are incapable of being able to feel the emotions that I'm feeling. And I feel like people inherently think emotions are messy. And so they associate this entire conversation with messiness, and messiness in and of itself is associated with being bad, and so something as benign as an offering to, try on a different lens of reality, is, can be viewed as an attack by some people, and it can be, and people use that feeling of being attacked, ironically, to then not tune into the emotions, to not put themselves in someone else's shoes, and really to cut off that opportunity for understanding. And so I think it's incredibly relevant as a dance studio to be having this conversation, just from that perspective. And I have more, and it's taking me some time to put my words together. So I would love for, if someone else wants to chime in or add or engage with that. Yeah.
Thanks, Misha. Floor is open.
So I guess I was wondering, Misha, I definitely hear you, and I definitely agree that it's like there's a lot of emotion that comes along with with mass social change, and mass social movements, you know, and oftentimes it's hard to tell where things are going, and the world is definitely an uncertain place for everyone. It seems like you're saying that you've experienced resistance from people. What kind of, like, in terms of being able to change their realities, what have you been experiencing?
Gotcha. So what I meant by lens of reality is, for instance, you know, and I think, you know, and this is my personal opinion. I don't, you know, if I'm open to hearing discussion around this, but, you know, I personally don't want this to be a discussion about kind of like a lot of the, you know, protests that have been happening. But to use that as an example, you know, some people's reality is that, you know, Black people are just upset. And when they're upset, they break things, you know, and that's an oversimplification, but that's some people's reality. And that's, or their own lens or perception of reality, you know. And the other reality is that, you know, it's been a systemic thing for, you know, upwards of 4 centuries. And so when people are offered, you know, and this, you know, people come into this tension in a bunch of different ways, but even people in my own family, when it's been an offering of like, well, have you thought about this? You know, regardless of how polite, impolite, level-headed, angry, sad, upset, apathetic it doesn't matter what tone I spin it in, because that information threatens their reality, their perception of me attacking them is somehow justification for them to invalidate an entire movement,
Yeah.
regardless of what's happening in the streets.
Yeah.
And so it's that type of, you know, cutting off of access to their own emotions, to the possibility of trying on different lenses, you know, for people that they claim to care about. In some cases, for people in your own family, you know. And so that's kind of what I was talking about. Did I answer the question you were asking?
Yeah, definitely. I guess I was wondering if you had like an instance of like a kind of reality that you were trying to introduce to someone. Maybe this is a good place for you to express that. I suppose. Like, suppose like when you're going to somebody trying to change their reality, there's something that you want them to understand that they're resisting, like that's violent. So I guess I wonder if you, what experiences, if you have a particular instance that maybe you want to share, like a reality that you may want to share. Sorry, Jay, I didn't mean to.
Jay, you're muted.
I kind of wanted to chime in about the resistance, and I think that sometimes it's like a lack of consciousness that we see out in the world. That's somewhat of the resistance, right? The lack of understanding, the lack of empathy for what's going on right now. So that's not a particular person, just a widespread thing, maybe among a lot of people who don't have a deep understanding of the experience of a person that's maybe a different color. It doesn't, and this is just an example. I mean, there's the example is just not having enough empathy, right? And then that discrediting, you know, invalidating your experience. So it's not a particular person or instance. It just seems to be widespread. So that's just what I wanted to say about resistance. And I think that's what we're seeing. It's somehow, it's systemic, we know, and it's somehow deeply embedded in, gosh, in just about everyone, right? We all have these biases or these tendencies, but it's like, yeah, we're not perfect. We want to open dialogue about that. We want to see those parts of us that where we're lacking and see how can we understand another person better, right? And in this case, it just happens to be, you know, Black people in this situation. It's just, I can make it about, not seeing anyone, just not deeply understanding, but it just happens to be over and over again.
Misha, did you want to respond to Ardisher's question to you?
I mean, it's not.
I guess I was just asking, like, what is that?
Hold on, let Misha finish first, please.
Well, so I guess, I mean, there's a lot of different avenues and lanes. Like, there's no one right way to help someone or get someone to consider another reality. For some people, they need their current reality broken down before they can consider other things. For other people, they need a history lesson, or for other people, myself included, there have been times where I've had conversations with people, partners even, who I could spew off history and instance after instance going back 400 years. They still wouldn't get it until I snapped and got angry at them and yelled at them and gave them a silent treatment for an entire week.
Yeah.
They didn't get it until I brought emotion into it. And that's not to say everyone needs that type of explosive emotion. And at the same time, I personally felt like, did it really take me reliving my trauma and then putting myself into a state of anger for you to believe me? And so that, regardless of all of the different avenues that exist, I'm of the opinion that everything is the perfect tool for something. And in this case, my rage, my petulance, my my silent treatment just happened to be the perfect tool that I didn't even know would be the perfect tool. Here I was thinking that I could just educate them, as like, and I mean, this is in one particular instance, but it reflects conversations in certain degrees that I've had with friends, with relatives, that who would have thought, given everything that's being said right now about the protests, who would have thought that literally not even 4 years ago, me blowing up in someone's face would get them to feel empathy for me and to understand. And so this is like everyday stuff that I've experienced, and to see on the news that like, okay, now that there are and there aren't certain ways to get your point across. And I'm like, yes, but not everyone is going to be brought to understanding by the same 2 or 3 ways.
Yeah.
All of it is needed, and wisdom comes in knowing, being able to evaluate the present moment and choose the best tool for communication. There's no bad or good rules or tools for communication. It's only what's good for the particular moment. And that can vary from community to community, that can vary from person to person. And the idea that, and so that's very surface level, just communicating differences. And so when people try to cut you off at that surface level of communicating differences by saying you're not doing it right, that in and of itself is stopping people from even trying to understand, stopping people from even opening up channels of empathy or communication, And so that's kind of, to answer the question, there's it depends on the person, and it depends on the situation, for people to be able to open themselves to trying on a different reality and really being able to see that.
I would like to just comment on some of the things that you talked about, Misha. So the thing that's interesting to me is that this is not the first time we've gone through this, seeing police brutality. We see it, constantly, and it's another hashtag, and it's a cycle that's played out in the news media constantly. But I feel like what is different this time is that the entire nation and almost the entire world is experiencing like shared trauma together. And whereas previously people had been going about their lives and too busy to really dig in and do the work, there's been a lot of stillness in people, and they've been allowed to sit and digest the information they're seeing. And because they're actually not able to be mobile, they're not actually able to go about their normal lives in the way they were a year ago, it has been such a traumatic and devastating and grief-stricken week. But it's also been very hopeful that people that I've seen previously very, antagonistic when sharing these kinds of news stories, or just like unresponsive, have finally started to speak up or realize that maybe there's an issue here and there's some work that they can do on themselves, and also showing a willingness to start doing some work on themselves to be more anti-racist and learn how to do that, starting with the history and everything wrong with themselves, has been one thing that I hope will have a long changing impact on society.
I think I'd like to kind of comment on that too. I think that the reason why maybe now is the time that we find that everyone is so emboldened is because I think we've had a moment, everyone in the world has had a moment to just pause. I think specifically in America, we've been so poisoned by individualism, and we've struggled so hard. Everybody, we've gone through such big things in the recent decades that now we have this shared struggle that we've all dealt with. Everybody's had time to pause. Everybody stopped, we've been forced to maybe stop our hustle or stop thinking so strongly about maybe our struggle, our thing, our goals, our wants, our needs, all those things. And now we're not so distracted by these toxic claws of individualism or, our personal hustle. So I think that, at least I know in my circle of friends and everything, we've all felt through specifically the pandemic, we've felt like, wow, like, being forced to stay home and being forced to not do all these things that we love, we realized like how much time we wasted before. We had all of these things that we could have done. We had all of these things that we could have, we've had all these things that we could have dedicated our time to, and we didn't because we were distracted with life, getting after our own thing. And so I think that now that we've all taken a pause, we've taken a break, and we're sitting at home and we're seeing what's going on in the world, I think all of us now maybe can take a moment to have the capacity to have empathy and compassion for our neighbors, because we're not just thinking about ourselves anymore. There's so much going on, and we've all dealt with so much, but now we've taken a pause, and it's like, well, damn, this is pretty crazy. And now we have the time to care about our neighbor. And I think maybe that's a huge reason why it's so different now. And I know for myself, it was very much that way. Like my whole life, I've felt like, oh, I really care about, all minorities and all of our struggles and all those things, but it actually, in retrospect, now I didn't care enough because I didn't do enough. And now I can. So, commenting and responding to Chris, and I think that is what's different now, is that we all now have, like, we've had a pause, and now we have the emotional, mental, capacity to think about what's happening to everybody else outside of our own selves,
And I do just really, I'll be super quick.
Go ahead,
Shane, I'll
Nisha.
have to pass it on to you. And I think, the time that people have had does help. And I think it also just kind of still points to the larger embeddedness of this, how systemic it is, that, like how can people who also feel like they care not have enough time in their day, emotionally, physically, mentally, to do that? And that's a reality that's created by a lot of the, wage inequities, which You know, there are plenty of other inequities, but the point I'm trying to make is that these inequities that get created for non-people of color trickle down, and Black people are kept in the status quo, you know? And so like, I agree with everything you said, and I wanted to add and qualify that and add that on.
Yeah, if I could just, I guess chime in with what Vivian was saying. Yeah, I agree. I think, well, of course, there are some huge negatives of the virus, you know, the coronavirus. But I think it has worked to like strip away all the distractions, you know, creating that pause that Vivian was talking about, and I think it's really shown us, you know, to Vivian's point about, you know, she made reference to like America's like rugged individualism, right? COVID's really shown us how interdependent like we really are. Like we really are depending on people around the world to either come up with a virus, or come up with a vaccine. We're relying on people to like wear their masks when we go to do simple things like going to the store. So we're much more dependent on each other, interconnected than we would like to admit. And then, you know, I guess I could share like, you know, my thoughts where I'm at with all the things that have been happening. I mean, as you can imagine, I'm born in the late 60s. So I have some very vivid memories of like other instances like this. So, like for me, I can, you know, the feeling I had watching, you know, that young brother get like torture murdered Monday was the same like feeling and kind of like just jaw dropping like awe that I had watching the Rodney King beating, you know, when he was just beaten by like 3 or 4 police officers, tased, batons, helicopters flying around. And just, oh God, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're good.
Okay. And it just so happened that we had like video technology that came on the scene and we could actually see it that time. So saying all that to say is that for me, I guess I'm desensitized a little bit. And I'm more concerned about like, you know, when I look on the screen at the news and I see 30,000 people in Houston, you know, and I'm inspired by how diverse the crowd is. I'm very inspired by how young the crowd is. Reminds me of my students. I teach undergrads, and we talk about class and generational poverty and race. So I'm always inspired by their conversations in my class. So I'm inspired by the numbers that I'm seeing, but at the same time, you can't vote, you can't make significant change if you're on a damn ventilator. You know what I mean? So I'm really concerned about what we're going to experience come June. Like I'm watching the news and I'm seeing Black, white leaders and all the colors in between, you know, being very supportive of the demonstrations. And I am too for the main cause, I am. But at the same time, no one is saying 108,000 people died last week. Like hundreds of people are dying like right now. Like this thing is real. So I'm hoping that like I said, I'm very inspired by the diverse crowds. I'm inspired by the youth, and I'm really hoping that I don't know, like there's like a funeral plan for tomorrow or something. We all know from different news reports about how they've done contact tracing, and they found outbreaks stemming from a funeral or some guy going to a club. So yeah, I'm inspired by the youth. I'm inspired by them gathering, but I really want to see that passion march toward like the freaking polls in November. You know, if you want to do something about systemic racism, then we have a real opportunity to make our voices heard, to maintain the House. We have a real opportunity to like change the leader in the White House. We even have a possibility of doing something with the Senate, you know? So if we can keep our eyes on the prize, I don't know, we're massively going to demonstrate, but we can make top-down change and we can really do something at the polls, you know? So that's all I have to say for right now, please.
I think to kind of go off of that, I know for myself, like I'm younger, like a younger generation, 29, you know, born in 1990. And I didn't realize the power of my voice as an American citizen until the impeachment hearings, because I was able to listen to it via podcast, you know, when I was driving, things like that. Like the modern technology gave me access to being really active with following all of the hearings. And what I constantly remember was how everyone talked about how these leaders and these senators and things like that, and people in Congress, they are all about their constituents. Like everything that they do is because of their constituents. They really don't make, in a sense, like a personal decision, for lack of better words. Like they work off of what their people want. And then that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, it's not just about voting for the president. And I didn't know that my whole entire life. And I'm 29, you know? And so I think that a huge, what I feel like what needs to happen is that we need to educate our youth on how much their voice matters and what exactly that means. Because I know that me and the people that I surround myself with, a lot of people feel like, you know, I'm just one person in this massive country. So like and I felt that way too. You know, I felt the same exact way. Like, oh, like what does my vote matter? Like there's all these other people, like, you know. And I think that when the people feel empowered, as cliche as it sounds, I think because we say it so much, we don't understand what that means. Like, oh, the people, it's all about the people, and it's about empowering the people. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, you know. And I think that for the young people, I think we need to really work hard to have them understand that your voice really does matter. And I know that a lot of people feel like, you know, the protests and things like that don't, there's so much, I don't know, maybe people feel like it's extra, or it's overreaction, or it's unnecessary, and it's counterproductive and things like that. But, you know, if you continue to tell the young people that that's, you know, that they don't matter, that they're not going to show up to the polls. They're not going to show up to where it really, really does matter. And they're only like myself, I'm only going to think, oh, I just have to vote for the president. I'm not going to really understand what it means to like vote for the local governments and the people that really actually make things happen.
Totally. I'd like to say something on this because I'm super duper passionate about this. Like the civil rights activist in me like kicks in, because that is 100% true. Like as much like, and that's really unfortunately like where I think like that's why this momentum is so good, because it's really a great opportunity, I think, to remind people that institutional racism happens because of all of us. Like, in other words, a lot of it is because of the laziness of governments. If you don't watch your elected officials, if you don't know where their budget is going, then you don't know what police programs are giving it to. You don't, you know, like, I mean, police programs, like, do they work? They've worked, like they're better, but you know how it is. They get money, they throw it, and then, you know, they have objectives and goals, and then who's watching? The people have to watch. Like, and so that's why I find it so important to find out, like in local government, who your local government is, who your local police, like know your local assembly person, know the people who represent you in the California Assembly, in the state Senate, because those are real democratic processes that languish if nobody watches them. Then what happens? Rich corporate interests who have time and money, then, you know, they say to themselves, well, it's ours for the taking. So then, unfortunately, you know, then the political process gets exploited by people who just have the time and resources, I think, like was mentioned before. So it's like, and I also think like finding institutions that can help you figure out those issues, like there are the NAACP, ACLU, those type of institutions actually help people figure out those issues. So I would say that's so important too, like to engage in the local political process, the state political process. It's not just the president. Watching even the candidates that you like I oftentimes, like, I like Bernie Sanders, but I don't mind burning on him, because who's going to do it other than the people who voted for you? You got to watch your elected officials. Otherwise, things languish. So yeah, absolutely. Definitely getting
We do have some comments in the chat that I'm going to read. Nyan weighs in. Thank you all for coming from a place of humility and acknowledging we need to put the work in to bring folks together while holding ourselves accountable to take a bolder stance. Teresa Tam, happy to be listening to this dialogue from the other side of the globe. Stephanie says, when the protests end, we cannot forget what we feel now. We have to embrace being uncomfortable until we can embrace something better. That is when real change will happen. When Kristen was talking, sure, it feels like an awakening. And then we have Stephanie also saying, yes, we must also hold our elected officials accountable. They represent their constituents. And then we just have some other people, Ivan Lopez and some others just chiming in support for various people and points. I'd love to hear from anyone we haven't heard from yet, or anyone that just wants to chime in.
I can speak, I guess, a little bit just about my personal observation on something that that I saw what happened with my high school. You know, I graduated in '95, and you know, Rodney King happened like '92, '93. And I'm actually pretty proud. I was pretty proud of my high school. You know, in my memories, you know, it was a fine experience, right? My high school was like 90%, almost 96% Asian, and the white and the black folks were, you know, like just a tiny portion of it. And we're all part of this Facebook group, like the alumni. And what's been happening, which has been eye-opening for me, has been a lot of folks have been coming out now, talking about actually how mistreated they were, and how a lot of the language and the treatment, how it was very common for kids to drop the N-bomb, the N-word, you know, and what I observed on the Facebook group was immediately there was a reaction from so many alumni saying, you're blowing out of proportion, you know? And then there was a counter reaction to that, which was that, no, we're not. And that, what was a little bit heartening was that it did feel like there was an avalanche of responses to that. Saying, hold on, you have to listen. But, you know, I have to say, like, I had no idea. And I guess maybe being Asian, Indian Asian, I was in that majority where I guess, you know, I had no idea, you know, and I guess, you know, just, you know, it's been a trip. It's been that part to me has been eye-opening, just like, wow, okay, you know, what were my blind spots when I was growing up? What are my blind spots now? You know, like even in Tango, like what am I missing? Anyways, I just want to throw it out there.
I totally agree. I am the same way. I grew up in an extremely different than Sachin. Like, my high school was actually very ethnically diverse, and I feel very, very, very blessed that I grew up in that kind of environment where all the ethnicities were relatively equal. But I have to say that within my community, because I was surrounded by so many Asian people, and we were so like, there is this, in my personal experience, there is this feeling that like, oh, I must not be like racist because I'm like a person of color. And I think that's hugely toxic to this movement, because I don't realize how the systemic racism, and me being a model, which is what I wrote on my Facebook, is me being a model minority, how much that's played into me not realizing how I contribute to, you know, this disease of racism. And I feel like it was the same in my high school, and it was the same just throughout my life, that like, you know, people around me, because we were we had a lot of Black friends and we were really into hip hop and we were really into the culture, like people would say the N-word, and I have as well, and not the really bad one, I guess, like the more, but I shouldn't say it anyway. And I didn't realize that until I was older, that like, what am I doing? Like, why do I feel like this is okay? But I heard it around me my whole life and it was okay, you know, and you don't realize that when you're surrounded. So I think that people need to speak up and need to stand up against their own peers. So we understand how I've grown up in a way where it was okay. And now that I am older and part of a broader community, I realize like, oh no, like that's not cool. And it's, I guess I feel like it's my duty to speak up against that and tell my peers like that's not cool, like, and this is why. And I think that personally for me, demonstrating is really powerful. I think that I can say as much as that I want on social media, but my social media, because of the algorithms, only hit the people that already agree with me. So like, what does it matter if I'm just speaking the same thing that all these other people are speaking? I'm trying to reach the people that don't agree with me, and they're never going to see my posts. They're never gonna get there. So for me, I feel like demonstrating is trying to bring and call attention to all the other people that might not be hit because of my social media algorithm or this, that, the other, or who I'm connected to on Facebook, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Has anybody tried to do that, to reach out to people who have differing views and discuss things on Facebook or social media, or get their view or perspective, or engage in a dialogue?
Yeah, I think we're doing that right now too. I definitely am. I wanted to comment about what Vivian was saying and what Sachin was saying. Even people of color have internalized this racism. Okay, I think that's really important to say. Like that's what we see. That's what's normal. That's what we see. That's what's that's the structure. So we've internalized it too, and even people as color, we uphold it. We're also bringing attention, and I have been, white people will also uphold it, even unconsciously, not intentionally, but unconsciously, right? So there is such thing as white privilege. There is such thing as white supremacy, white fragility. And like, these are ways that they deflect the situation. They don't, not seeing, waking up to this reality. It's kind of hard not to right now to understand that it's still difficult for people to wake up to this reality. We're talking here, most of us see it, yet there's some people, and we know them in our circles, who don't see it so clearly. Misha was saying how she has to talk in however many ways to maybe get a point across. And I agree, what way does that need to be delivered to you so you can eventually understand it? And I hold a lot of compassion for that, because I understand it's not easy to change. What we're asking people to do right now, no matter who you are, to change this consciousness, is for you to evolve as a person. Like, this is a spiritual journey. If you're now just understanding what your whiteness is, we're trying to tell you how to like dissect that to what's the word? Like unengineer that. But that's been your whole identity, your whole life. So anyone who's undertaken a spiritual journey of just understanding yourself, your personal development, I mean, as a white person, this is what we're asking you to do, is to understand your whiteness, your privilege, your supremacy, your fragility. There's a lot of, there's easy ones when we talk about fragility, like, well, what did I do? I mean, I'm not bad. No, you're not. It's not, we're not saying that, but these are, we've been talking about, what I want to shift it toward is, it's not about a diversity thing, right? Like, we have diversity, we have Black history, Asian American studies, we have all this stuff. And that's not what I think, like in police departments, people need to learn. We need to understand upholding whiteness and this idea of whiteness and what white supremacy is and what white privilege is. it's the whole conversation about even thinking about this is so crazy. Like, why is that even, you know, like, for me, it's okay to say it, but I know that as I'm saying this, it could be really uncomfortable for someone, for me to call them white and think that that's their color, or that's that's you know, it's like, it's their identity, right? Like there's something about that. Okay, I might be need to cut myself off right now, but yeah, we need to explore that a little bit more. Okay, and that's what's, I don't think is, I think that's, we have to say it. I think that's part of the problem.
It is a problem. I want to make sure that we get Nicole in here. She's been trying to get in. And then I just want to hold Jay's point in our mind, because I think that is the crux of it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Whew. So I know it's a heavy conversation, but there's no way around it. Just taking the heaviness. In my opinion, everything okay? It's not static here or anything? I just want to make sure. In order to fight for Black Lives Matter, you have to lose your white privilege. There's no way around it. You have to lose the things that, as the things Jay said, that's embedded in your identity. And it needs to be called out. And right now, we're looking at what's happening with African Americans and other people of color in the country. But the farthest we'll go is 400 years, because at least for Americans, that's where we'll look at the history. But this history, racism and racism, takes it all the way back to Europe. And it's rooted in a lot of European culture as well. And I think that too needs to be connected with us. But you see, because we're Americans and we declared our independence, we want to cut ourselves off from that. And it's like, no, at least not so much us, but white ancestors. No, you have to talk to your ancestors on the other side, because it's rooted in there too. It's rooted in your class system. It's in how you treat each other. It's definitely rooted in the church. It's a never-ending cycle. So it is frustrating when we know that there are white people that mean well, and they want to come to us to ask for the problem. But then we call you out and say, no, you're the problem. And you're like, no, I don't know. You're the problem. You are. And I'm still shaking here, but it's rough. And I think I understand by law that there needs to be changes in law. But you see, we have a culture of this, and it's the culture that needs to change. There's only so much that law can do. There's only so much that policies can do. But it's the culture around that needs to change. And that is the heart that needs to change. Because in order to change that, as white people, you have to change everything of who you are. And there's a lot of trauma in a lot of European history that is so deep and so rooted that it will take you eons to untangle. And then our people and other people of color are wrapped up into it. And also, for those who are people of color but don't identify themselves as Black, it gets hard when you benefit from, I would say, passing with the benefits of white privilege. And then you treat us the same way until something happens to you by a white person. And you go, oh my God, what happened? So it was hard for me to watch the video. It was. It's also very saddening that a man's life had to end in a way that you would kill an animal because of a fraudulent check. I don't think writing a fraudulent check warrants that kind of level of police, and let alone that kind of death. It shouldn't. Or whatever that story is, but it did not warrant that. And I'm pretty much very numb because I have to keep seeing hashtags. I have to keep seeing all these different people dying. And I have to see my people protest and say they want justice. And then we have to go back to the everydayness. So I think there was a few people that said that because of where we are now, because of the virus, that we actually get to absorb, because this would have just been another Black man. And then we all went to the store, we all go to the bank, we all go to work, and then we have to deal with the everydayness of, I guess, would now be considered just very annoying things in our life. White people asking you dumb questions, asking you, can I touch your hair? Things like that. So it's, yeah. And as far as opening up a dialogue, I tried. And I'm one for, even if you're a conservative point of view, but I need reputable sources. My person did not give me reputable sources. So I was like, nah, I can't. You know, I'd rather you give me proven books, probably. I'd rather do that. But I have to say, I'm glad that Megan and David, that you guys are open to the dialogue. It's good. Also, kind of be aware about the audience that is around you, of who is speaking on this conversation, because we kind of need the other side to speak, and they're not here right now, just you two.
What's the other side, Nicole? So I make sure I understand.
More white people in the conversation.
I see.
People who aren't trying to combat their white supremacist society.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, in our history, it's just, I know a lot of people, you know, shut down when you mention slavery, like, oh my God, slavery, but technically, and my mom, she made a good point the other day, technically, it's not so much that we need to get over it, but white folks aren't really over it because of what happened during the Civil War. And it's like, why don't we start there? Because that's where a lot of your problems came to a crescendo, right there. And then go from there. But it's really right there in this country. But we don't want to go back there, but we have to. You have to face that trauma. You have to open up that wound and clean out that wound. You can't just keep putting a Band-Aid on it. That's the Band-Aid you're using is duct tape. That shit hurts.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah. Nicole, I like how you called it trauma. I think it highlights something. And, you know, if you're somehow not, now I'm talking about the, you know, other people out there that might not be feeling this or feeling it the same way. That's what's hard for me to understand. If you don't feel and you're not sensitized to what just happened, you're very likely traumatized, right? Like there's something there that's insulating you from feeling this. And this was like a basic human thing. This is why I can feel loss here too, because I'm not grieving just George Floyd. I mean, I'm also thinking how people are looking at this and how other people can't be also affected. Like, I feel a loss, of a fellow person, but loss of humanity when you see people are not reacting humanly to this, right? There's people who've desensitized so much. And that's, Nicole, to your point, that is a level of trauma. When we deflect and don't see, those are parts of us that we've somehow numbed or killed off or never developed well enough. And it's historical. It comes from a history. So, I mean, so Nicole, I appreciate you sharing, because that's the other point about talking about this right now. Someone died, right? Someone was murdered. And I think we need to spend some time to grieve that loss. And I see it happening right now, that people are out in the world grieving it, and we have to give it space, so I'm kind of short with people, or, I'm as holding compassion, but understanding I got to shut that down when people are like, but this, but that. Just be quiet, just listen, just hear, try to come from a place of understanding than your political views, than your other, who knows what other agendas. Somebody died. So it's, and I want to be consoling to somebody, to me, this looks like, if I had a cousin and her mother died. So I feel for that. Like, that's also someone in my family too. I might not feel the same way, but I want to offer condolence, and I also need to grieve myself. So in light of that, it's 9 p.m. So I was going to step out for a little bit. There was supposedly something they called a silent protest. I would change the wording. I would call it a vigil for George Floyd. So at 9 p.m., I think they were going to hold like 9 minutes of outside. So anyways, I just wanted to share that. I don't know if you guys can hear me still. But
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear
okay.
you. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jay.
No worries. So just step out. I'll come back for in a little bit, if you guys are still here.
Thank you.
I mean,
Okay.
I would respond really.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just to respond really quickly to, well, Nicole, you said a lot of things that are worth responding to, but just mentioning that you'd like to see some more white people in this conversation, I think is good for us to hear, because we actually have the opposite concern when we're thinking about this. What if we just get a bunch of white people who want to pat themselves on the back for whatever? No one wants to hear that. So I think that, I think that you're right, that can really be part of our focus in making sure that the whole community is participating in this conversation. I've been really kind of blown away at some of the empathy that I've been hearing in this conversation for the other side. A lot of understanding, in my opinion, way more understanding that it is even warranted or justified for why it's so hard for certain people to hear why they might be complicit in what's going on. I've certainly encountered a lot of that and experienced a lot of that in myself now and over the years. So we somehow have to find a way to make people feel comfortable saying what they think. We have to know what they think. If you think something about this, you disagree with us, you think you're a Tango school, you shouldn't be doing this, you think you're wrong, you think the protests are done wrong, whatever you think that might be contrary to what we're saying, I hope that people will say it out loud so that at least we can know what people are thinking, and then we can go from there. We invited quite a few people to come on that didn't come on. I suspect most of the people I would characterize as maybe offering some other perspectives didn't want to come on. I honestly don't blame them. They don't know what they're walking into exactly. I think maybe if they heard the way that we're talking about it, maybe they would be more open to it. At the same time, I don't want to be too open to it. I don't know. It's complicated, but it's good for us, I think, to hear that, to hear that there is a demand to open up the conversation that way. And we'll keep, we'll just all keep working and brainstorming ways that we can do that.
If it helps alleviate people's fears, I'll just be honest and vulnerable and say that when Megan approached me, I know that I felt like a little bit like, do I want to speak? Where am I getting myself into? What am I not? So for people who are listening, I guess there are people listening live. I personally don't feel that way. So if that helps, like, oftentimes I think that people are afraid that they're going to be taken out of context, which I think is oftentimes a lot of the misunderstanding. Like, sometimes people, like, I've noticed, just on a side note, I've noticed that people, like, there are some lines that are drawn on social media that are a little bit extremist in the sense that they're political slogans. So political slogans are meant to punch. So when you say a life is worth more than, let's say, property, there are some people that seem to go on one side or the other. Well, but it's somebody's property and I don't want to, that's somebody else's life. And another person says, but life is more important. And so sometimes it might be, it can be fraught for people because they're afraid that they'll be misunderstood if they take a position one way or another. I can imagine that happening. I'm sure we've all felt that way. So I thought to share that it seems like that's part of the process, is being okay, like just being okay to say your voice. As long as you're saying your honest truth, then you're fine, I think, personally. That's how I do it.
I definitely agree with that. I think for me, it was really, really hard for me to start speaking up about everything that's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, because I was so scared of, I think the call out culture, as cliche as the term is, really stunts a lot of people, because the moment that we put it out there, anybody has full reign to say something against us. And I think for myself, I realized that, like, the privilege that I have, like, I technically don't have to say anything, is like the very thing that the Black Lives Matter movement is fighting for. Like, me being an Asian woman, I don't technically have to stand up because it's not my fight, but it absolutely is. And I think that that's where a lot of my passion lies, is hopefully inspiring my fellow Asian Americans to step out of their box, of their comfort zone, of what we've been conditioned to be quiet, be docile, don't ruffle any feathers, don't do this, don't do that, don't say anything, don't speak against anyone, because I think that what Black Americans need are actual allies. I think that, going back to Nicole's experience and what she was sharing, and this is what a lot of my Black friends feel, is that what my Black friends feel, they're so traumatized and they're so exhausted from fighting this fight for so long, that now this is happening and everybody's just like, well, here we go again. I don't know what change is going to happen because this has been happening for so long, and they're just mentally, they don't have the capacity to fight anymore. And I don't know if I would either. And so I feel this like moral obligation to speak up and try to maybe inspire my friends around me, because it's like, we haven't dealt with the level of racism, the level of prejudice in America that my fellow Black Americans have dealt with. So I feel like I mentally have the capacity to maybe, hopefully, like, do what my friends are too exhausted to do. And then hopefully through maybe my speaking out for them, or not for, I shouldn't say that, like speaking out on behalf or in as an ally, it will re-spark some hope again, because this has been happening for so long. And it seems to me that on a general sense, only the Black people are screaming. It's like, where are all the Asian people that are screaming? Where are all the other ethnicities that are oppressed? What are we saying? And it's like, well, we don't think it's our fight. At least that's what I've experienced with the circle around me. So for me, and I mean, I can go on and on about this, but I feel that yes, I get white privilege. I agree with it. I believe that it's a thing, but I think it's poisonous to say just white privilege, because then for some reason all the ethnicities think that, like, oh no, it's not my privilege either. You know, my privilege isn't all that bad, but it actually is. I know for myself during this whole thing that I've had this huge like Jay was saying, like spiritual awakening of like, oh my God, I'm complicit. And I never thought that I was, because Black culture has defined my life. And I did not realize until now, being this old, being blasted with all this stuff, that, oh my gosh, like I'm part of this. And now what can I do to rewind and maybe fight against all the things that I've been raised with believing, you know, and you know, for myself, I want to calm down because I'm getting real passionate. I feel that again, as cliche as it sounds, and I say this again because my passion is rooted in bringing awareness to other Asian Americans who maybe don't realize how complicit we are, and how our mentalities, our upbringing, our teachings from our parents are racism adjacent. I would never call myself a racist, but now seeing everything going on, it's like, oh my gosh, like what have I done to fight this? And I think that yeah, I think that what is stunting this movement is the fact that other persons of color, other people of color aren't stepping up the way that they should aren't stepping up the way that they should be on behalf of our Black neighbors that are so tired that they can't, you know, they're just, and so I feel, you know, I think that I feel that everybody really needs to like look deep inside themselves. It's not just white privilege, it's all the privilege of all the ethnicities. And I think that we really need to take a look deep inside and see, you know, how we've contributed to this and what we can do to fight it, because it affects all of us.
And
sorry, go ahead.
I just really want to jump in and say, you know, that like even just to hop off of that, you know, being an ally doesn't have to go straight from being completely unaware to like, you know, protesting in the streets or holding, you know, like awareness groups. Like, just like I was saying before, how, you know, harboring the allowance of other people to be treated as less than allows space in yourself to be treated as less than. You know, even though it's not the same degree of trauma for white people, it needs to be treated as trauma that needs that type of unpacking. White people need to be treating their privilege as that type of trauma and do the work to unpack it. You know, don't give yourself additional stumbling blocks by, you know, letting your expectation think that it's going to be easy, or letting your expectations be like, oh, I'm not doing anything if I'm not doing everything possible. You know, just like people go to therapy and unpack their trauma and it takes weeks and years, you know, trauma, privilege needs to be unpacked that way. You know, and or even if it's just you're bringing on a new habit, you know, like drinking water, you know, do whatever works for you to unpack that, you know, whether it's setting an alarm on your phone or joining a support group or what have you. You know, like allyship doesn't have to go from 0 to 100, but people are staying at 0 because that's how they feel like it needs to be. They're like, I don't know what 100 looks like, so I'm just going to stay at 0 for now.
Yeah.
You know, and
Absolutely.
so like, that's kind of what I wanted to say about, you know, dipping your toes into allyship. And I think that this is really important, to be holding these spaces, to be giving other people permission to be unsure about it by you yourselves coming in and saying, we are unsure and we are doing it anyway, you know? And so I think it's important to keep holding forums like this. And, you know, it's like, the other side of that is that privilege really only takes you so far. You know, even with privilege, you know, I I feel like what people don't understand is that even the whiteness of somebody's skin, whether you're white or whether you're white passing, it's not enough to save you when it comes to supporting Black people. Like the hatred of Blackness is still going to far outweigh even like the white and white passingness. That's why you see all protesters of all colors getting rubber bullets to the face. You know, at the end of the day, you know, like people will, you know, cut off their own just for having been in contact with Blackness, you know? And at the same time, when you take on being an ally, you know that, I mean, like that's, you know, part of being an ally is recognizing that, you know, that your whiteness will not save you from this country's, you know, systemic hatred of Blackness. And I'm not saying everyone hates Black people. I'm saying that people are so invested, you know, like that's like that's a view that needs to shift, you know, that your privilege won't save you even when you are being an ally.
Right.
You know, and then that's what it means to be an ally, is to give up that privilege, to demonstrate, you know, with your voices, with your bodies, that, you know, there should be equality. I feel like there are a lot of people who are, you know, at the very best misguidedly and at the very worst dismissively calling for unity. And I feel like people perceive that unity has existed already and that it's something we're trying to get back to, when really it's not. Unity has not existed. And you know, every single way we're protesting, whether that's at the polls, whether that's in the streets, whether it's allies educating other allies, we are, you know, we are trying to break down actively the division that has existed in the possible unity that can exist. Unity is not something we're trying to get back to. You know, unity is something we are trying to create that hasn't previously existed. And so I think those are some key things that, for me, at least in my conversation with other, you know, non-Black people of color, with white people, you know, have really resonated. Those are like the nuggets of conversation I've had with people that are like, you know what, you need to talk about that, you know, because it hit home with me. And so, you know, if like really privilege, you know, really privilege gives you more time, you know, it's not, you know, at some point this machine is going to get to you. You know, whether it's because you're poor, whether it's because you're a woman, whether it's because of whatever, that machine will get to you too. And the privilege is having time before that machine gets to you, before it goes through everyone else. And so with that, you know, time is your most valuable resource. And, you know, one way that people can really, like a very, I want to say innocuous way to start, is to start looking at the places and spaces and people with whom you are spending your time. You know, if you don't feel up for a conversation, your presence speaks volumes. You know, if you remove yourself from a community or from a person or from a situation that perpetuates racism, especially if it's within family, if it's with circles of friends, they will notice your absence, even if they cannot notice the absence of like the Black people who are dying. They will notice your absence. And when they ask, hey, why don't we hang out anymore? Why don't I ever see you anymore? You can tell them, you know, and it's up to you to really decide how much it serves you and how much it serves your allyship to engage with them or not. For some people, that's going to look like tons of engagement. And for some people, it really is just going to look like starting to remove yourself, remove your patronage from spaces, and really just stop spending your time and energy, which is your most valuable form of currency, at those types of places. I'm not saying that that's the only thing, because then there would never be dialogues like these. But, you know, in kind of really highlighting all the different possible lanes of allyship that exist, if that seems like a comfortable place to start there, and let there be urgency in knowing that you can learn along the way, and making a commitment to learn along the way, making sure to unpack your privilege in the same way that we are, like, you know, that people unpack their traumas. And, you know, like, your presence is validation enough in any given space. And I think it is really important. And I am really grateful that, you know, you hold a space like this, because, you know, what that says for Oxygen Tango is that, you know, this is the time that we value, you know, And we are going to use our time, use our name, put that on the line, you know, to at the very least show that, you know, this is what's important, and we're heading here even though we are uncertain. You know, we are heading here despite the fear. And it's, I mean, I feel like for me, those have been amongst, you know, like white and non-Black allyship, those have been, I think, at least from what I've seen. You know, I don't want to validate one method of allyship and invalidate other methods of allyship, but from what I've seen, for me personally, holding those types of spaces for people and really, really taking a look at where and who you're spending your time with has been, you know, a really encouraging and powerful method of allyship.
Yeah, those are all great points, Misha, and totally valid. Like, you really hit the nail on the head. Like, and Nicole too, and her point about bringing people who are not yet comfortable with this conversation in this space. It's a violent process. I come from the South, and it was very racist growing up, even in the 90s. And they use proximity to Blackness as a scare tactic on children. You know, like, I remember like people using racial slurs, you know, like if you had a like Black friend and you hung out with them alone, like the white kids on the playground would make fun of you. So these are all really like real things that are happening and being ingrained in children from elementary school, like in the South, I'm sure elsewhere in the country. And so when you take on allyship and try to start talking to the people in your circle about it, it can be a very exhausting and emotional process, and you will probably end up cutting people out of your life, you know, or just basically having to have a different relationship with them if they're not going to look within themselves and fight some of the racist system that we're a part of.
And I've even had to have conversations with like members of my own like non-Black family. You know, I've had experience growing up where members of my non-Black family have said things along the lines of, I'm so glad that you're not like loud like other African-American people.
Yeah.
And this is someone in my family.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
the token, you're one of the good ones. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and I just happened to be a very shy, introverted person growing up. I still consider myself to be, you know, a relatively introverted person. And, you know, it's like, and it's never because, you know, I don't ever want it to be a polarizing thing. You know, it's never because like, oh, well, you're not down with the cause, so I don't care if you're in my family, I have to cut you off. It's like, no, like for the sake of other people in my family, for the sake of people who I love, people who I call friends and dear to me, I can't keep hanging around and giving you time and energy showing that it's okay to be around me when I also claim to care about people of color and Black people, you know? And like, it's not ever a decision that comes with, you know, like vindictiveness. And I think, I mean, even that right now, you know, Black people are seeing all over social media, people maybe that they hold dear and haven't talked to in a long time, all of a sudden they are having to see these people, you know, like have these really harmful, hurtful, ignorant worldviews, you know? And it's always great when you see someone be able to kind of turn that around or educate someone or, you know, do that. But a lot of the times, you know, it's on top of dealing with a pandemic, on top of dealing with all of the systemic heaviness already, we are also dealing with being isolated during a time where we are losing friends over things that they want to post on Facebook, but really are telling about their true beliefs. And so there's the added trauma of, you know, being like, oh my gosh, I thought this time that I shared with this person, this connection I made with that person, you know, do I educate them? You know, do I ask somebody else to educate them? Do I cut them out of my life? How do I ask these questions, you know, while I'm making myself dinner or working or, you know, like in some cases, you know, trying to put together a virtual birthday party and figuring out, oh shoot, can I not invite this person? Like everyday things. And, you know, I'm really, really, really of the opinion that, you know, it's like, it's a form of self-care to go into this knowing that it's not going to be easy. And, you know, to give yourself time and space around that, but also know that, oh gosh, I had something. I had something and I lost it, but yeah, like just know that it's not, it's okay, here we go. It's okay really to like be wrong. You know, it's okay to have been wrong. And I feel like, especially when Nicole was talking about culture is very heavily how we spend our time when we're not working. And so in order to change the culture, you know, we really, you know, and I think especially with something like a dance studio, like having that type of solidarity really says like, we don't, you know, like it's not fair for you to spend whatever free time you have if you're going to harbor these views that have real physical consequences for somebody else. And so, you know, I think allies creating space for each other to be wrong and to process being wrong is great. And I think, you know, there's nothing wrong with being wrong, but there is something wrong with staying wrong. You know, there is something wrong with choosing to be wrong when you've been presented with an alternative, you know, because at that point it is a choice. And it's not like a choice you have to make right now today, although that would be the most beneficial, you know, because it is one of those things where, you know, these types of injustices are happening as recently as last week. You know, like process being wrong and, you know, forgive yourself for however long you've been wrong for, but don't stay there. You know, you don't have to stay there. And it's not like, you know, I mean, there might be people who are like, but you were wrong for so much in the past. And, you know, this isn't like a free pass to just be like, let me forget everything I've ever done or everything I've ever believed and kind of absolve myself. It's like, no, the absolution is in changing, so to speak.
Thank you, Misha. I think that felt like a great place to wrap it up, unless anybody has something that they're really wanting to say. This is obviously a conversation that has to continue. We're still figuring out and feeling our way through it. I just want to I really appreciate you all for being here and taking the plunge with us. I particularly appreciate the Black people who showed up to this call. It was a lot to ask. So thank you for being here and for sharing with us. Yeah.
I'd also just thank everyone also. I'm sorry, I'm also going to leave in just a moment. I'd like to thank everyone. I really learned a lot just being in this conversation. It's very hard to explain to me, but I really do appreciate like all of you. And I also feel like I've been able to connect to all of you in a very positive sense. So I'm sorry for interrupting, Megan, but I just wanted to say that because I wanted to leave. Thank you, really. No worries. I hope I've also helped and contributed in some way. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Arsha. Yeah, I guess to close, just want to share, my friend Joyce texted this to me and immediately labeled it as cheesy, but it socked me in the gut. And she called attention to the fact that we are oxygen, Tango. And she said, if one person can't breathe, nobody should feel comfortable breathing. And I guess that's where I'm at right now. It's got to get personal, particularly for white people. It's got to get personal. It's not enough to just be not racist. We now have to be anti-racist and vocally. So yeah, thanks you guys. I just feel really lucky to be a part of this community and to be able to have a conversation like this. I really learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan and Dave, for putting it together.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure
Yeah.
thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care, and we'll be in touch about keeping this going.
Good night, everyone.
All right,
Good
good
night.
night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Right.